I remember that brunch like it was yesterday. The sun poured through the tall glass windows of our family's favorite brunch spot, casting long shadows on the polished wooden floors. I sat in my usual corner, the one where I could quietly observe without being the center of attention. My coffee had long gone cold, but I kept stirring it, a nervous habit I had developed over the years. No one really noticed me. They never did. My sister Harper, as always, commanded the spotlight. She leaned back, her designer blouse catching the morning light, a fresh diamond ring flashing on her finger. She laughed, tossing her hair back. "Your old job was a real snooze fest, wasn't it, Amelia?" Harper said, her voice cutting through the gentle hum of the cafe. "I mean, it's kind of funny when someone your age still doesn't have a real career." My jaw tightened. I didn't respond. I just pressed my lips together, my hand still mindlessly swirling the coffee in my cup. Mom glanced at me, her eyes silently pleading for me to ignore the jab. "Harper," she said softly, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "Don't be like that." But Harper just shrugged, a smirk lingering on her lips. Silence to her was weakness, proof that she had won. My father tried to steer the conversation away, mentioning the eggs Benedict being a bit too salty today, but the tension lingered. It clung to the air like the steam rising from our plates. What they didn't know, what no one at that table had any idea about, was that I had built something far bigger than the shallow career my sister mocked. Years ago, when Harper was basking in the glow of her first promotion, I was sitting in a tiny, cramped apartment with my college friend Daniel. Together, we were typing out the first lines of code that would become the backbone of a groundbreaking data analytics platform. Today, that project had grown into CodeWave, a tech company valued at over $65 million. But I chose to stay behind the scenes, letting Daniel be the face of the brand. I never appeared in interviews. My name rarely mentioned outside of legal documents and shareholder meetings. I didn't care for the spotlight. I just wanted to build something real, something lasting. Harper had no idea. She still thought I was the quiet little sister with her head in the clouds, always one step behind, always the shadow to her spotlight. But that morning, as she continued her monologue about her latest client meeting and the amazing deal she had just closed, something shifted in me. I could feel it like a cold, sharp edge pressing against my mind. I took a slow sip of my coffee, my eyes fixed on the swirling patterns of light on the table. Harper had no clue that the world she was stepping into, the tech firm she so confidently spoke about joining, was my world, and she was about to walk right into it completely unaware. 3 weeks after that brunch, I got an internal notification. New application, Harper Carter. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes fixed on the screen as my sister's face appeared, smiling confidently in her neatly framed resume photo. Harper, the same sister who had just weeks ago mocked my career, was now applying for a role at my company CodeWave. I read through her application. She had listed her skills with the kind of bold certainty I remembered from our childhood. Budget management, financial strategy, organizational restructuring. Impressive, if not a bit exaggerated. The irony of it made me chuckle. The very company she was now looking to join had been built from the ground up by the quiet sister she had spent years underestimating. I clicked on her cover letter. It was full of the usual buzzwords: team player, dedicated problem solver, highly adaptable, but it was her closing line that made me pause. "I believe my experience in financial analysis and my proactive approach to budget management would make me a valuable asset to CodeWave. I am confident that I can contribute to the ongoing success of your organization." I leaned back, a small bitter smile forming on my lips. She had no idea, not a single clue. That afternoon, I called Daniel into my office. He glanced at the screen, then back at me, raising an eyebrow. "Harper Carter, that's your sister, right?" I nodded, feeling the weight of the years of quiet endurance pressing against my chest. "What do you want to do?" he asked, his voice careful as if he were stepping over thin ice. I thought about it for a moment. The part of me that still remembered being the ignored, overlooked sibling wanted to reject her application outright. But that would be too easy, too predictable. Harper thrived on direct conflict, on loud confrontations. She would twist it into a story about how I had always been jealous, always threatened by her confidence. No. If my sister was going to walk into my world, I wanted her to do it without a safety net. I wanted her to see the truth, not through a blunt rejection, but through the slow, unsteady realization that the person she had belittled all these years had become the one quietly signing her paychecks. "Let's bring her in for an interview," I said, my tone steady. "But don't mention me. I want her to come in without any preconceived ideas." Daniel gave me a long, thoughtful look, then nodded. "All right, but you're playing with fire, Amelia." I just smiled, the sharp edge of anticipation settling in my mind. The interview process took 2 weeks. Harper breezed through the initial phone screen, her confident tone and polished answers ticking all the right boxes. She had always been good at selling herself, a skill that had carried her far in her previous roles. When she finally walked through the glass doors of CodeWave's main office, I watched her from the security feed in my private workspace. She looked around, taking in the sleek, modern interior, the polished glass walls etched with our company's core values: innovation, integrity, impact. I could see the excitement in her eyes, the slight upturn of her lips as she absorbed the hustle and hum of the open office floor. She had no idea that every line of code, every polished floor tile, every strategic decision that shaped this company had my fingerprints all over it. As she made her way to the conference room for her final interview, I leaned closer to my screen. Harper straightened her blazer, took a deep breath, and stepped inside, completely unaware that the quiet sister she had always dismissed was now her potential boss. A week later, I got the confirmation email from HR. Harper had been recommended for the role. They praised her confidence, her quick thinking, her ability to adapt under pressure. I sat back, a slow, steady breath escaping my lungs. The pieces were falling into place. That night, as I looked out over the city skyline from my penthouse apartment, I couldn't help but think back to all the times Harper had tried to pull me into her spotlight only to overshadow me at every turn. But this time she was walking into my domain. I reached for my phone and typed a single line to Daniel: "Approve the hire. Let's see how she handles the truth." Harper's first week at CodeWave went by without incident. I watched from the shadows, keeping my distance, letting her find her footing. She had no idea I was the one approving her every move, silently guiding her path within the company I had helped build. She quickly fell into her usual rhythm, her confident stride echoing through the glass hallways, her sharp, commanding voice cutting through the hum of open workspaces. I saw her review budgets, adjust financial projections, and dive into meetings with the same bravado she had always displayed. But as the weeks passed, I began to notice something. Harper was smart, no doubt, but she had a habit of overestimating her own abilities. She made quick, bold decisions, often without fully understanding the long-term implications. Then came the first crack in her confidence. One afternoon, I was in the server room on the basement level, checking the firewall logs for a minor security breach, when I heard the echo of high heels in the hallway. I stepped out, and there she was, Harper standing in the doorway, eyes wide with surprise. "Amelia?" she stammered, her eyes narrowing. What are you doing down here?" I met her gaze, keeping my expression calm. "Just checking on a few system updates. Why are you here?" She hesitated, her perfectly shaped eyebrows knitting together. I got turned around looking for the finance archive. This place is like a maze." I smiled, a slow, calculated smile. "You'll get used to it. This building has its secrets, just like the people in it." She forced a small, nervous laugh, her eyes flicking around the room as if searching for something to anchor her suddenly shaky confidence. At that moment, Daniel stepped out from the server room behind me, a thick file in his hands. He paused, glancing at Harper, then back at me. "Amelia, here's the latest AI performance report. Needs your sign-off before Friday." He handed me the file, his eyes briefly meeting mine with a silent, knowing look. Harper's eyes froze on the scene, her mouth slightly open. She didn't say a word as Daniel turned and walked back into the server room, the door clicking shut behind him. I held her gaze for another long, silent second before stepping past her. "Good luck finding the archive," I said over my shoulder, my voice calm, controlled. I didn't look back, but I could feel the weight of her stare on my back as I disappeared around the corner. The real turning point came 2 weeks later. Harper had started to gain some traction within the finance department, pushing through cost-saving measures and restructuring proposals with the kind of relentless confidence I remembered from our childhood. She even managed to win over a few senior managers who initially doubted her abilities. But then she stumbled across something she couldn't ignore: a small, seemingly innocuous line item on a quarterly budget report. It was a signature tucked away in the digital file marked Amelia Carter, co-founder. I found out about it when I received a late-night message from Daniel. "Daniel, just a heads up. Harper found the budget file with your signature. She's starting to ask questions." I leaned back in my chair, my heart slowing, the faint glow of the city skyline casting long shadows across my office. It had taken longer than I expected, but she had finally begun to pull at the loose threads. The next morning, I watched from my office as Harper marched down the hallway toward the finance department, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floors. I had to give her credit. Once she set her mind to something, she pursued it with a single-minded focus. She pushed open the glass door to the finance team's workspace, her voice carrying through the hall as she demanded access to the full financial records for the past year. I watched through the glass walls as she leaned over a junior analyst's desk, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently against the edge of his monitor. Moments later, my phone buzzed. Another message from Daniel. Daniel, she's in the archive. This should be interesting. I exhaled slowly, feeling the slow, steady pulse of anticipation building in my chest. When Harper finally found the document she had been looking for, the master file that contained every founding agreement, share distribution, and key financial decision from the early days of CodeWave, I knew the game had truly begun. The file contained everything. Every sleepless night, every risky financial gamble, every calculated decision I had made in those early years to keep our dream alive. My name was there in black and white alongside Daniel's, listed as co-founder and chief technical architect. The sister she had once dismissed as a quiet, directionless dreamer had built the very foundation she now stood on. That afternoon, I got another message, this time from HR. Internal alert. Employee Harper Carter has requested access to founding documents. Please confirm authorization. I leaned back in my chair, a slow, steady breath escaping my lungs. It was happening. Harper was beginning to see the truth, but I knew my sister. She would fight this realization, deny it, search for every possible way to explain it away before she ever truly accepted it. And I was ready to let her. The next few days were quieter than usual. Harper stopped her usual confident strut through the office halls. She no longer leaned over her colleagues' desks with the same carefree confidence. I could feel her eyes on me, the weight of her silent questions hanging in the air every time I passed her in the hallway. Then one evening, as I was wrapping up a project review in the 10th floor conference room, I heard footsteps echoing down the empty hallway. I glanced up as the glass door slowly swung open and Harper stepped inside. She paused, her eyes flicking over the whiteboards covered in technical diagrams, budget projections, and project timelines. I watched her shoulders tense, her jaw set in a hard line. She looked like someone who had just stumbled upon the final piece of a very confusing puzzle. "Amelia," she said, her voice tight, controlled, "I need to talk to you." I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap, maintaining a calm, neutral expression. "Of course. What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the strap of her leather handbag. For a moment, I thought she might back down, might decide that some questions were better left unasked. But Harper had never been one to retreat. "Are you the co-founder of CodeWave?" She forced the words out, each one heavy with disbelief. I met her eyes, my face giving nothing away. "Yes." She blinked, her carefully curated facade cracking at the edges. For the first time in years, I saw something like genuine shock cross my sister's face. Since the beginning?" she whispered, her voice unsteady. I nodded, leaning forward slightly, my tone steady. "From the very beginning. Daniel and I started this company in a tiny apartment with nothing but a few battered laptops and a shared dream." Harper took a shaky step back, her eyes wide, her carefully polished world suddenly tilting on its axis. But you never said anything," she stammered, her eyes searching my face for some sign of the sister she had always thought she knew. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why hide it?" I felt a flicker of old resentment stir in my chest. Memories of family dinners where my quiet achievements were overlooked, where my passions were dismissed as hobbies, where Harper's every minor success was celebrated like a national holiday. "I didn't need the spotlight," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "I just wanted to build something real, something meaningful, and I didn't need anyone's approval to do it." Harper's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing as she tried to process this new reality. I could almost see the gears turning in her mind. The years of casual dismissals, the offhand comments about my side projects and freelance work suddenly taking on a much sharper significance. For a long, tense moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound in the room was the soft hum of the overhead lights and the distant whir of the building's central air system. Then Harper took a step forward, her chin lifting, her old bravado slowly returning. "So all this time," she said, her voice sharp, tinged with a new bitter edge, "you've been sitting in the background, watching me struggle, judging me from a distance, letting me think I had to prove myself to you." I met her gaze, my eyes steady. "I never judged you, Harper. I just chose a different path. One that didn't require constant validation." Her face flushed, a deep, angry red spreading across her cheeks. I could see the battle raging behind her eyes, the desperate attempt to cling to the familiar narrative where she was the successful, confident sister and I was the quiet, aimless dreamer. "But why?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Why stay hidden? Why let everyone think you were just some nobody?" I felt a strange calm certainty settle over me, the years of quiet endurance crystallizing into a single clear thought. Because I didn't need to be seen to matter, I said, my voice cutting through the tense silence. I didn't need the applause, the attention, the endless approval. I just needed to build something real, something that would outlast the fleeting spotlight you crave so desperately. Harper took another step back, her breath coming in short, shallow bursts, her carefully constructed world finally crumbling around her. You built all this?" she whispered, her eyes darting around the room, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. "And you never said a word." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms across my chest, my expression cool, unyielding. "I didn't have to," I replied, my voice calm, unshaken. "The truth always comes out eventually." Harper stood there for a long, silent moment, her eyes locked on mine, the weight of her unspoken questions pressing down on both of us like a storm about to break. Finally, she turned, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor as she stormed out of the conference room, the glass door swinging shut behind her with a sharp final click. I watched her go, my heart steady, my mind clear. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The days that followed Harper's confrontation were quieter than usual. She stopped appearing at the morning meetings, skipped the weekly finance reviews, and no longer floated around the office with that trademark confident stride. It was as if the foundation of her world had suddenly cracked and she was struggling to keep her balance. I let her have that space. I didn't reach out, didn't push for a resolution. I knew my sister. She needed time to process, to come to terms with the new reality she had stumbled into. Then one rainy evening, as I was wrapping up a late meeting with Daniel, my phone buzzed with a message. "Harper, are you still at the office?" I stared at the screen for a moment, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I took a deep breath, then typed back a simple yes. 5 minutes later, there was a hesitant knock at my office door. I looked up as Harper stepped inside. Her hair slightly damp from the rain. Her makeup smudged, her usual polished confidence replaced by something more raw, more real. She closed the door behind her, leaning back against it for a moment, her eyes fixed on the floor. For the first time in years, she looked uncertain, almost small. "Amelia," she began, her voice rough, unsteady. "We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap, my expression calm, neutral. "Go ahead." She took a shaky breath, her fingers tightening around the strap of her handbag. I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, her voice catching slightly. "About us. About everything." I didn't respond, letting the silence stretch out between us, giving her the space to say what she needed to say. "I never really saw you," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I always thought I had you figured out, the quiet, directionless little sister with her head in the clouds, but I was wrong, so wrong." I felt a flicker of something, not quite satisfaction, not quite relief, but something close to it stir in my chest. "I guess I always needed to be the one in the spotlight," she said, her eyes still fixed on the floor, her hands nervously twisting the strap of her bag. "I needed the applause, the attention, the validation. And you never seemed to want any of that. It made me feel like I had to shine even brighter just to justify my place." She looked up then, her eyes meeting mine, her expression raw, unguarded. "But I never stopped to think that maybe you didn't need the spotlight because you were building something real, something that didn't need constant applause to have value." I felt a small, bitter smile pull at the corners of my mouth. "I never needed the spotlight," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "I just needed to prove something to myself, not to anyone else." Harper took a slow, unsteady step forward, her eyes shining with something I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking on the last word. "I'm so sorry, Amelia, for all the times I dismissed you, for all the times I made you feel small. I see you now. I really do." I felt the tight knot in my chest loosen, the years of quiet resentment slowly dissolving into something softer, something closer to forgiveness. "I know," I said, my voice steady, my heart strangely light, "and maybe that's enough." We stood there for a long, quiet moment, the sound of rain pattering against the glass windows, the only thing breaking the heavy silence between us. Finally, Harper took a deep breath, her shoulders straightening as she stepped back toward the door. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now, more certain. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I just nodded, watching as she turned and walked out of my office, the door clicking softly shut behind her. The next week, as I reviewed the latest quarterly financial reports, I noticed something new. A small but significant line item in the CSR budget, Internal Sponsorship Initiative for Junior Employees. I clicked on the file, my eyes scanning the proposal. It was well written, carefully structured, with a clear focus on mentorship and career development for new hires, particularly women in tech. At the bottom of the document beneath the signature line, I saw Harper's name followed by a simple italicized note inspired by the quiet mission of Amelia Carter. I leaned back in my chair, a slow, genuine smile spreading across my face. A few days later, I ran into Harper in the break room. She was pouring herself a cup of coffee, her back to me. When she turned and saw me, her eyes flickered with surprise, then settled into something warmer, more open. "Morning," she said, her voice steady, her smile tentative but real. "Morning," I replied, reaching for a cup of my own. For a moment we stood there in comfortable silence, the years of silent resentment and unspoken tensions slowly fading into the background. As I turned to leave, Harper cleared her throat, her voice stopping me at the door. "Amelia," she said, her voice a little quieter, a little softer. "Thank you for everything." I paused, my hand resting on the door handle, my heart strangely light. "You're welcome, Harper." That weekend at our usual family brunch, I watched as Harper quietly joined the conversation, no longer dominating the room with her loud, confident declarations. She laughed at our uncle's bad jokes, offered to help our mom with the bill, and even asked me about a recent project I had been working on. For the first time in years, I felt like I had my sister back. Not the flashy spotlight-chasing version, but the real Harper, the one I hadn't seen since we were kids. And as I watched her smile, her laughter blending with the soft clinking of coffee cups and the low hum of conversation, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we were finally moving towards something real, something honest. And that, I thought as I took a slow sip of my coffee, was more than enough. Story 2. You ever look back at a single moment and think, yeah, that's when everything cracked? For me, it was the day I found out my mom rewrote her will, leaving everything to my younger brother Darren. Her house, her car, the savings account I'd been unknowingly helping to replenish for years, all of it, to the same kid who hadn't lifted a finger his entire adult life. Meanwhile, I'd been sending her $1 and $500 a month quietly without question, just to help keep the lights on. Or so I thought, but that's jumping ahead. Let me start from the beginning. I was 5 when my dad passed away. A spring morning. I remember because he was flipping blueberry pancakes in the kitchen, humming off key and trying to get me to flip one with him. I was in the living room dressing my stuffed elephant in doll clothes. Don't judge when I heard the spatula hit the floor. Next thing I remember is flashing lights, neighbors whispering, and my mom's shaking hands. My dad had a heart attack. Just like that, he was gone. The house, once loud and warm, suddenly felt like a museum. Too many rooms, too much quiet. Less than a year later, she met Greg at some grief support thing at the community center. Tall guy, construction boots, gentle eyes. He never tried to replace my dad, and that's probably why I ended up loving him like one. They got married, and by the time I was 7, Mom sat me down with this glowing face and said, "You're going to be a big sister." She looked like she was announcing she won the lottery. I didn't know it then, but that was the day I became background noise. When Darren was born, everything changed. Mom quit her teaching job, said she wanted to be fully present for his early years. Funny, I don't remember anyone being fully present during mine. Suddenly, every day revolved around Darren, his nap time, his organic baby food, his mood. Meanwhile, I became the kid who reminded her she had another one. Greg noticed. He tried and really tried to keep things balanced. He'd help me with homework, drive me to karate, even sneak in pizza nights, just the two of us. But even he couldn't fix the black hole Darren became in our household. Mom started forgetting things, packing my lunch, picking me up from practice. Once I sat outside my school for an hour because she got the days mixed up with Darren's speech therapy. When I mentioned it, she laughed and said, "Oh, sweetie, I've just got so much on my mind lately." I stopped reminding her. By the time I was 12, Darren had been through art camp, music class, 2 different tutors, and a gluten-free phase, despite having 0 allergies. I, on the other hand, got a pack of highlighters and a good luck with middle school wave. Greg was the buffer between us. He fought for me. I heard him once in the kitchen telling Mom, "You've got 2 kids, Sarah, not 1. Her response, "Darren just needs more. You wouldn't understand." What really killed me was how calmly Greg responded, "No, but Lily does." Darren turned into a lazy, moody kid with expensive taste. Video games, sneakers, vape pens he swore he didn't own. And somehow all of it was Greg's fault or the school's fault or the world's fault, never his. At 16, I was working part-time at a bookstore and saving for college. At 16, Darren was failing sophomore year and blaming the system. Greg kept trying. He offered to enroll him in baseball. Mom lost it. "Do you want him to get hurt?" she screamed like baseball was a battlefield. Instead, she signed him up for pottery, which he dropped after 3 sessions because the vibe was off. I got into college on my own. Greg helped me pay for it quietly behind Mom's back. She wanted to save that money for Darren's future. He might need it more, she said. Greg's face hardened when she said it. Lily's future is now. So I left. Went to Marshall University. Far enough to breathe. Calls home were mostly to Greg. Mom always had a thing, or Darren had a meltdown. But Greg? He never missed a call. When I landed my first internship, he mailed me a handwritten card. Who even does that anymore? Then Darren got worse. According to Greg, he was falling in with bad influences. Greg tried to get him into construction work, something to anchor him. Mom flipped. He's not cut out for manual labor, she sniffed like it was beneath their delicate genius. When I visited, Darren barely looked up from his gaming chair. The stench of Red Bull and indifference filled the hallway. He didn't say hi, didn't say anything. Just grunted and went back to whatever war he was pretending to win on screen. By then, Greg had stopped trying to fight Mom, but he never stopped showing up for me. At 27, I finally bought a place of my own. Small one-bedroom with a balcony just big enough for a chair and 2 potted plants. When I invited everyone for a housewarming, only Greg came. Brought wine, gave me a toolbox, told me he was proud. Mom said she couldn't come. Darren had plans. I asked what kind. She said just plans. I heard his video game blaring in the background. That night, Greg told me the truth. Darren wasn't working. Didn't go to school, just mooched and sulked and refused to contribute. When Greg offered him an entry-level job again, Mom called it demeaning. Too smart to be a laborer, she said, but not too smart to drain everyone else, I muttered. Greg laughed tiredly. You said it, not me. That was the last real conversation we had. A year later, Greg died. Massive heart attack, just like my dad, just like that. At his funeral, Mom put on a Broadway-worthy performance. Tears, wailing, hand to forehead, the whole show. Darren showed up in sweatpants. I stood there watching it all unfold, thinking, here we go again. Another good man buried, another family reset with the same broken code. A few months passed. Mom called, said she needed help. Her voice was weaker, the kind of voice that pulls you back in. I went. Of course I did. The house was falling apart, peeling paint, uncut grass dishes in the sink. The woman who used to iron our towels now looked like she hadn't brushed her hair in days. She sat me down, said the money was almost gone. Greg's savings were drying up. Darren still wasn't working. And then came the ask, could you help? Just a little while, or $500 a month would keep us afloat. I should have said no, but I saw her trembling hands, the water-stained ceiling, the shame tucked beneath her words. I agreed. That was mistake number 1. I visited more often. Darren was still glued to the couch, still looking for work, whatever that meant. When Mom twisted her ankle, I hired a caregiver with the money I'd been saving for a trip to Greece. When the wallpaper started peeling, I hired a contractor. When groceries ran low, I filled the fridge, all while Darren's girlfriend Candy with an eye moved in, with her fake lashes and microwave dinners and total lack of boundaries. You live here rent-free, eat food I pay for, I said one day. You could at least rinse a damn plate. Her response, this house isn't yours, it's Tommy's now. Didn't your mom tell you? Cue the emotional nuke. Candy, yes, that's her real name, and no, I don't know if it's short for anything, looked up from her phone and said, this house belongs to Tommy now. Your mom signed it over. There's a will and everything. I just stood there, my hands still full of groceries I had just bought. Is that true? I asked Mom later in the kitchen. She didn't look up at me, just kept flipping through her stack of coupons, none of which she'd ever used. Yes, she said, her voice flat. I waited for her to explain. Anything. But she just sat there like it was the most normal thing in the world. I don't understand, I said quietly. I've been helping you for a year. I've been sending money, paying for repairs, food, medicine. Meanwhile, Tommy hasn't worked a day in his life. Mom looked up finally. Her face tightened. Don't talk about your brother that way. I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was just insane. She'd said it so many times over the years, like some kind of automatic script. You know what hurts the most, I said? It's not even the money. It's the fact that you chose him. Again. Always. Her voice sharpened cold now. You don't understand him. You never have. Tommy is special. He's not built like you. I think I knew what she meant. She meant I was the one who could survive being ignored, that I didn't need her the way he did. But that doesn't mean it didn't cut deep. And then she said it. The line that ended whatever we had left between us. I never loved you the way I love him. No emotion, just the truth, blunt and ugly. Something inside me just stopped. I walked out. Didn't slam the door, Didn't say a word, just left. Candy was still on the couch stuffing her face with the cookies I brought. She didn't say anything either. She just smiled like she'd won something. And maybe she had. I don't remember the drive back to my apartment. Don't remember what I did that night. I just remember opening my banking app and staring at the monthly transfer I'd been sending to Mom. $1,500 every single month. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I canceled it, just like that. The next few weeks were quiet. Quieter than they'd ever been, honestly. I went back to work, started focusing on my savings again. It was weird. I used to feel guilty about spending on myself, like I owed my mom something, like I had to prove my worth. But that feeling, it was gone, replaced by something else. Relief. Then exactly 1 month later, I got the call. No hi, no how are you? Just, the money didn't come through. Something wrong with the bank. I didn't even blink. Nope. I canceled the transfer. Silence. Heavy, shocked silence. Then came the explosion. Are you serious? After everything I've done for you? That's what she said. I actually laughed again. Everything you've done for me? You mean like forgetting I existed? Making me Tommy's personal maid? Telling me you never loved me? You know I didn't mean that, she snapped. Sure you did, I said. And honestly, thanks. It made things a lot clearer. Then she really lost it. Tommy and Candy are planning a vacation to Cancun. They've been counting on that money. My jaw dropped. A vacation? You were using my money to fund their vacation. They need a break. Tommy's under so much stress. I think that's the moment I broke no healed. All the years of bending over backwards, trying to be the good daughter, the reliable one, the helper, and here she was screaming at me because I canceled a payment that was apparently supposed to finance Cancun. You made your choice, I said. You gave him the house, the money, the future. Now he can take care of you. Don't you dare hang up on me, Lily. But I already had. Then I blocked her. It didn't stop there. Mom moved her campaign to Facebook. Long posts about how some children just turn out selfish and how after all the sacrifices she'd been left to suffer alone. People started commenting, old neighbors, distant cousins. I started getting messages. Some were subtle. Hey, saw your mom's post? Everything okay? Some were not. You should be ashamed. Even Darren joined in. Sent me a message that said, Mom's crying because of you. You better start sending money again. Or else. I replied once, here's an idea. Get a job. Then I blocked him too. The final straw. Candy found me on LinkedIn. Yes, LinkedIn. She messaged me a whole essay about how Tommy's a sensitive soul and he's not built for the stress of a traditional workplace, and how my mom is basically on the verge of collapse because of my cruelty. I didn't respond. Just reported it as spam and moved on. 6 months have passed. I don't know how they're doing. I don't ask. And for once, I don't feel guilty about it. I started putting that $1,500 into a house fund. My dream is to buy a little craftsman-style home with a fenced-in yard and a lemon tree in the back. Somewhere I can finally breathe. Some nights I light a candle for Greg. He always told me I deserved better. He'd be proud. The other day, I passed a construction site. They had a big sign out front, now hiring, no experience needed. I thought about snapping a photo and sending it to Darren, just for the irony, but I didn't. I just smiled and kept walking. There's this strange kind of silence that happens when you finally stop trying. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels clean. Like after a storm when everything is still wet and broken, but the air feels new. That's what my life became after I cut them off. No more guilt. No more emergency calls. No more second-guessing every decision I made because I might upset my mom or inconvenience my brother. Just space, to breathe, to think, to live. I started doing things I hadn't let myself do before. Went out on a weekday, signed up for yoga, took a solo trip to the Smokies, sat under a sky so wide and quiet it made my chest hurt in the best way. Funny what you notice when nobody's draining you. I noticed how much I liked cooking just for myself. No frozen lasagnas, no stretching grocery budgets so Tommy and Candy could binge chips on my dime. I bought real herbs, fresh bread, took my time, and I started sleeping better. No more waking up to 5 missed calls. No more emails with the subject line, "We need to talk." No more transfer notifications making my stomach twist. Just sleep. Of course they didn't disappear completely. People love to talk when you stop playing the role they cast for you. My aunt called out of the blue, said she was concerned because she hadn't seen Mom in weeks, and Tommy had posted some cryptic messages on Facebook about betrayal and fake family. I told her the truth. No drama, no anger, just facts. I supported them for a year. Mom gave everything to Tommy. She told me word for word she never loved me the same. I decided to stop financing my own erasure. She went quiet after that, then said, "Well, I didn't know it was that bad." Nobody ever does until you leave. Around that time, I got promoted. More responsibility, more pay. For the first time, I looked at my account and didn't immediately subtract the $1,500. It was still there, growing. I used some of it to start therapy. I told my story week by week, the favoritism, the silence, the slow unraveling of love that was never really there in the first place. My therapist asked if I ever wanted to rebuild. Rebuild? With what? The wreckage wasn't mine. I didn't tear anything down. I just stopped standing in the ruins pretending it was a home. One day I got a letter, handwritten, from Mom. Inside was a shaky, barely legible note. "We're struggling. Please, Lily, come back. Your brother needs you. I need you." No apology, no ownership, just more of the same script. I didn't respond. That was the moment I knew it was real. I didn't need to respond. I didn't owe anyone a response. Months passed, then a full year. I bought the house. Small brick lots of light, a porch swing, a tiny patch of earth where I planted lavender and rosemary, the kind of place that feels like a long exhale. I painted the walls myself, scraped my knuckles on the edges of joy, every lamp, every throw pillow, every cracked mug mine. Not inherited, not guilt paid, mine. I think about Greg sometimes. He'd show up with a tool belt and a crooked smile if he were here. He'd check the outlets, shake the porch railing, say solid bones, just like you. I wish he could see this version of me. The one who finally stopped waiting for crumbs. The one who realized her worth wasn't measured in how much she could give to people who only ever took. Sometimes late at night I wonder how they're doing, but only sometimes. And even then I don't wonder for long, because I know how the story goes. I lived it for years. Darren's probably still gaming, still too stressed for work, still convinced the world owes him something. Candy's probably still on the couch, still burning through whatever's left in the fridge, still thinking she won a house instead of a burden. And Mom, she's probably still waiting for me to come back. But I won't. Not out of hate, not out of anger, but because I already left. And I've got no intention of returning to a place where love was always conditional. The truth? I didn't win. There was no dramatic revenge, no courtroom drama, no eviction notices or screaming matches. I just stopped showing up, stopped explaining, stopped offering parts of myself to people who only wanted to drain me. And in that quiet, I built something better. If you've ever felt like the second choice child, the one expected to carry the weight, stay quiet, clean up the mess, you're not alone. And no, you're not cruel for walking away. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop chasing love that was never meant for you. Let it go. Plant your own roots. Grow something from nothing. And when you look back, you'll realize leaving wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Story 3. That's what my mother said when she called me, voice soft and sweet, like she was doing me a favor. I was standing in my office in Seattle, staring out at the clouds rolling over Elliott Bay. My coffee was still hot and my inbox was a mess. But that sentence froze everything around me. "Come again," I said, my fingers tightening around the phone. Danielle moved into the Portland property, she repeated like it was totally normal. Just for a little while. She's been through so much since the divorce. She has nowhere else to go. She's living where I asked. The townhouse, Mom said. You know, the one you never use, just until she gets back on her feet. I took a slow breath. I bought that townhouse 2 years ago, my first investment property. I'm 34. I've spent the last decade grinding it out in finance, living below my means, and stacking up investments like bricks in a foundation. That house was supposed to become a long-term rental. I was even interviewing tenants last month. And now my sister had apparently moved in, without rent, without my knowledge, using a key I had left with my parents for emergencies only. "Did you think to ask me?" I said. "Well, your father gave her the key," Mom replied. "It was just sitting there. She had nowhere else, and you're doing so well." There it was. "You're doing so well." As if that justified everything. I didn't yell, didn't argue, just pulled open the folder in my desk marked Holdings Portland. Inside were documents my lawyer and I drafted last fall, paperwork shifting ownership of the property into an LLC, strict terms, legal occupancy agreements, corporate protections. I'd seen this coming. And now it was here. After we hung up, I sat back in my chair and let it wash over me. I knew Danielle. She was the kind of person who floated through life always falling up. Failed ventures, dropped dreams, endless reinventions that somehow still landed her a soft place to fall. And my parents, they were the pillows. When I was in college, I worked 2 jobs to pay rent. When Danielle was in college, she used her housing stipend to book a spontaneous yoga retreat in Costa Rica. Mom said, she just needs to recharge. Different rules for different kids. That evening, Danielle sent me a text. Thanks for letting me stay big, sis. I'm already making it cozy. Thinking of painting the cabinets. Hope that's cool. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Sarah, my attorney. Remember that tenant scenario we prepped for, I asked? It's happening. She didn't sound surprised. I'll start the process. Over the next week, I stayed quiet. Danielle posted photos online of her new start in the townhouse, painted one of the walls neon yellow, swapped out the light fixtures, threw a boho rug over the hardwood I'd just had refinished. Our mom called with regular updates. Danielle was doing so much better. So independent now, really owning the space. Nobody said a word about rent. Nobody asked if I was okay with my investment being turned into my sister's therapy project. So I documented screenshots, emails, photos, dates. I wasn't mad, not yet, but I was preparing. About 3 weeks in, Mom floated the idea of Danielle putting the utilities in her name. To help her build credit, she said. And maybe getting a puppy, she added voice light like it was nothing. I muted the phone and laughed into my sleeve. She genuinely thought this was fine. Later that night, Sarah emailed me a copy of the occupancy violations packet. Everything Danielle had changed in that house was now an official breach. Unauthorized alterations, structural modifications, potential zoning issues from subletting the spare room on Airbnb. I hadn't even realized she was doing that until I found the listing myself. Cozy Portland hideaway, artsy, pet-friendly full kitchen. That listing got bookmarked. I gave it 6 months. Let it build. Watched her journey unfold on social media. Home decor hauls, dog adoption stories. Posts about how sometimes the universe sends you exactly what you need. The universe didn't send her that house. I bought it. 5.5 months later, the final straw came in the form of a text. Hey, thinking of turning the basement into a pottery studio? You think the HOA would be chill with that? I sent it straight to Sarah. We go in next week, I said. During the birthday party, she asked. Exactly. They're throwing it at the townhouse, right? May as well give them something to remember. The day before the party, I flew down. Didn't tell anyone. My team met me at the property that morning, contractor, inspector, attorney. We did a full walkthrough before the caterers arrived. Danielle had ripped out a non-load-bearing wall in the guest room, painted the kitchen bright coral, sold the designer fixtures I installed, and replaced them with vintage knockoffs. The whole place looked like a Pinterest board gone rogue. It was time. That afternoon, I got a call from Mom. You're coming tomorrow, right? Danielle will be so happy. I'll be there, I said. Wouldn't miss it. I showed up to the townhouse just before 5:30 p.m. Caterers were already setting up outside. Music was playing, balloons on the porch. A handmade sign taped to the door said, Happy birthday, Danielle. There she was, barefoot in a flowing white dress, greeting people like the queen of her new castle. It was surreal. A house I bought, renovated and maintained, being showcased like she'd built it from scratch. I waited by the curb as my legal team arrived. Sarah walked up beside me, holding the envelope of official notices. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Let's go, I said. We walked up the driveway together. Danielle saw me first. Oh my God, Lena, she squealed, rushing toward me. You made it. I've been dying for you to see the place. Wait until you see the meditation room I made out of the office. I gave her a small smile, looking forward to it. Inside, the place was full. Family, friends, a few cousins, even some neighbors. People mingling with glasses of wine, complimenting the homeowner on her style. Mom spotted me from across the room and waved excitedly. You're just in time for the toast, she said, pulling me into a side hug. I looked around. Everything was exactly how I imagined it would be. Danielle's boho chic touches, the epoxy floors, the yellow walls, the cheap light fixtures. My father chatting with Danielle's new boyfriend, some guy she met at a real estate seminar who called himself a visionary. And not one single person had asked me about the house, as if I was the guest here. Then Sarah stepped forward and handed Danielle the packet, right there in the middle of the party. What's this? Danielle asked, flipping through the first page. Official notice of unauthorized occupancy and property violations, Sarah said calmly. You've been living here without legal right or consent from the owner. Danielle blinked. Wait, what? I thought Lena owned this place. I do, I said, but not as an individual. This property belongs to an LLC, which means it's subject to commercial protections and legal oversight. You're trespassing. My parents froze. Lena, come on, Mom said quickly, trying to keep her voice low. This is a bit extreme, isn't it? We're family. You handed her a key to a corporate property I legally removed from my personal name months ago, I said. Then you let her live here without my knowledge. That's not a family misunderstanding. That's called theft of use. Danielle was still staring at the packet, her mouth slightly open. You're serving me at my own party. It's not your party, I replied. It's mine. You're just renting the space for free, apparently. But the house feels like home, she said weakly. I've done so much to make it mine. That's the problem, Sarah said. You've done a lot, and most of it's illegal. I turned to my parents. She's been running an Airbnb. Did you know that subletting my property? Making money off it. She sold the appliances I installed, painted over the finishes, ripped out walls, and every single change she made is a building code violation. Dad spoke for the first time. Can't we just talk about this rationally? We are, I said. The only irrational part was pretending any of this was okay. By now the party was quiet. People were pretending not to eavesdrop while clearly listening to every word. One of the caterers awkwardly wheeled a tray of mini quiches past us. Danielle's boyfriend stepped up. Hey, can we not do this right now? This is supposed to be a celebration. Sarah turned to him. Are you the one who pulled permits for the wall modifications? He blinked. I mean, no, but it's just a wall. It's a structural wall, I said. You don't just decide to open up the space in a property you don't own. Danielle looked at me, eyes wide, a little teary. Why didn't you just talk to me? She asked. I tried, I said. Every time I brought it up, I was told to be understanding, to be supportive, to help my sister. So I stayed quiet and documented everything. She dropped into a chair. I didn't mean to cause problems. You didn't mean anything, I said. You just moved in, assumed it would all be fine, and started redecorating like it was your name on the deed. Mom stepped in again. Lena, honey, can't we just find a middle ground? I looked her in the eye. Sure, middle ground is this: she's got 30 days to vacate. After that, I'll file for unlawful detainer. She'll be on the hook for the damages, the back rent, and the earnings from the short-term rentals. That's not middle ground, Mom cried. That's eviction. No, I said, it's the law. The only thing middle about it is that I'm giving her time. Danielle stood up now, fully crying. I needed a fresh start, she said. I was going through so much, the divorce. I cut her off. You wanted a soft landing, and I get that. But this house, it's not a safety net. It's my future. I built this, and I'm not going to watch it be turned into someone else's playground again. By the time I left, the party had fully deflated. People were slipping out the back. The music had stopped. The birthday cake sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Danielle was sitting on the couch, the notice in her lap. Her boyfriend was texting furiously, probably trying to find another place to crash. My parents were just standing there, not saying anything. And me? I walked out the front door of my own property, calm and steady. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just left them with the truth they hadn't wanted to face. It's strange how quiet a house feels the morning after everything changes. I visited the townhouse again a week after the party. The place was still, almost like it was holding its breath. The flowers from Danielle's birthday were wilted. There was a stack of paper plates on the counter and a box of half-melted candles in the sink. But the air felt different now, like the house knew it was mine again. She hadn't moved out yet, but the notices had been delivered. The legal deadlines were in motion. She had 30 days to pack, clean, and leave. And for once, no one was rushing to save her from the clock. I didn't speak to my parents after the party. Not because I was angry, though. Sure, a part of me still simmered, but because there wasn't anything left to explain. They knew what they did. They knew it wasn't right. And for the first time in my life, they were being forced to live in that discomfort instead of handing it off to me. I gave them space. That was more than they gave me when they handed over my key. 3 weeks passed. Then one morning I got a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a text. An actual handwritten letter on cheap stationery. It was from Danielle. Lena, I'm sorry, really sorry. I won't make excuses. I know I crossed every line, and I know you had every right to do what you did. I didn't understand until now. I thought if someone had more, they should give. But I never asked myself if they wanted to, or if it was even fair. Thank you for the wake-up call. I needed it more than I realized. I read it twice, not because I didn't believe it, but because I wanted to believe it was genuine. Maybe it was. A few days later, I met her for coffee. She looked different, quieter, less sparkly, more steady. Hair pulled back, hoodie and jeans, no dramatic earrings, no breathless big idea energy. Just her. I moved out, she said first, all cleaned, no more Airbnb, no dog, nothing broken. I left your keys in the mailbox slot. Thank you, I said, simple. She nodded. We sat for a while without speaking. Just two people with too much history between them to pretend nothing had happened and too much shared blood to act like strangers. Then she told me something that stuck. I didn't just lose the house, she said. I lost the illusion. I thought I could always fall back on family, that someone would catch me. But I never thought about the cost. Not really. She sipped her coffee. I've been staying with a friend. Got a part-time job doing office admin at a staging company. It's small, but I'm paying rent, budgeting, not asking anyone for favors. I didn't respond right away, because that was the first real thing she'd said to me in years. She reached into her bag and slid an envelope across the table. The first payment, she said, toward the damages. I know the lawyers are handling it, but I wanted to give you this myself. I looked at the envelope, then at her. Her hands were steady. Her voice was clear. Keep it, I said. Use it for your course certifications. Get solid. Build something for yourself. She blinked. You're not letting me off the hook, are you? No, I said. The repayment plan still stands, but the gesture matters. She smiled a little. Thank you, she said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed she meant it. The next day, I visited the house again. It was empty now. No scent of incense or dog food. No posters taped to the walls. No plastic planters hanging from the ceiling fan. Just light, quiet, clean air. I walked room to room checking the damage and the repairs. It wasn't perfect. Some things would need fixing. But it felt like a home again. My home, not just in paperwork but in presence. A week later, I got an email from my dad. Subject line, no excuses, just apology. Lena, I was wrong. I gave your key away like it meant nothing. I saw you as a resource, not as a daughter with boundaries. I told myself it was love, but really it was just entitlement. I'm sorry. I sold my boat. The money's going toward the repairs. I know it doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because some words are meant to stand on their own. He finally heard himself. That was enough for now. The house is rented now, to a family with 2 kids and a Labrador named Benny. Real lease, real rent, real respect. Every time I get the payment notice, I smile. Not because of the money, but because I know what it took to make it mine again. Fully, truly mine. Danielle and I talk occasionally. Light conversations, small things. No pressure to be best friends again. She sends me photos from her staging projects, real projects, rooms she's earned the right to decorate. Her work has improved. So has her understanding of what it means to build something instead of take it. My parents are trying, slower than Danielle, but still trying. It's not perfect, but neither am I. What matters is this. I stopped bleeding for people who never offered a bandage. I gave them a chance to grow, and this time I didn't give it at my own expense. Sometimes standing your ground feels like standing alone. But over time you learn something important. Peace isn't quiet because nothing is happening. Peace is quiet because you've finally stopped being pulled apart by everyone else's needs. I built that peace the same way I built my career. Brick by brick, boundaries by boundaries. And now, the foundation is solid, and I'm finally home.